there is this backpacker, tourist traveling through Germany, and he comes to this nice beer garden in the southern part of Bavaria, and it's quite a peaceful time, and there's an old man sitting there in lederhosen, sipping on this 1-liter mug of beer. And the tourist gets himself also a beer and joins the old man. And after a while, the old man starts talking. Do you see this beer garden? I built it with my own hands. I went to the forest and got the best wood, and I treated it and gave it more love than my own child. And do they call me Sepp the beer garden builder? No. And then he points to a little hill, and there's a chapel, very nice, small one, and he says, do you see that chapel? I built it with my own hands, and I carried every stone up that hill. But do they call me Sepp the chapel builder? No. And then he turns around and points to the little lake, and he says, do you see the pier? I built it with my own hands. I drove the piles against the tide of the sand and put every plank. But do they call me Sepp the pier builder? No. But if you fuck one goat, and if Plone Intranet is remembered only for the things that it doesn't do well, then I would prefer if people do not even see or feel that Plone Intranet is there, and this is what that talk is about. Plone Intranet is a tool that helps you to get a job done. You're not using Plone Intranet because you have to use an intranet. And it's like nobody remembers the hammer when he was building a shelf, right? Because nobody wants to think about the hammer when he's building that shelf. If you know IKEA, then you know building instructions like this. And when you want to build that shelf, then you are completely focused on that building instruction. That's your job at that moment, and it's not technology. And in that example, the hammer is the technology. You just want the hammer to function. So Plone Intranet is the hammer, and the drill, and the pincers. And today I'm going to tell you how you can solve real-world problems with Plone Intranet that really improve people's work experience while not distracting them from their real task at hand. And why is that so important? Because many applications miss the point that people have work to do that has nothing to do with computer science, and they are not trained to understand computers. Who has experienced a situation like this before? Hands up. Not all of you, I see. Great. And do you know people who still complain that Microsoft Word is changing his user interface with every version? Yeah? And it's very easy to assume that everyone, especially in rich nations, is a computer literate. After all, nearly half of the world adults have a smartphone nowadays. But the OECD has made a study in 2016 which says that 33.9% of the users don't actually know how to use a computer. And even 10% of these, nearly 34%, they chose to do the test on paper instead, the computer-based test. About 5% of the adults fail the basic tests, which included using a mouse or scrolling through a web page. And 94.6% were at level 2 of 3 or below. At level 2, respondents had to solve a problem using an online form and some navigation across pages and applications. One example was responding to a request for information by looking through a spreadsheet and emailing an answer. That's level 2. Yeah? So we are not talking science here. Only 5.4% reached level 3, where the problem solving took place over multiple steps and operations. Writing a Word document and format it using tabs instead of spaces is level 3. So when we are expecting our users to understand more than 3 checkboxes, we are talking to 5.4% of the normal population. And we are not even talking about accessibility issues here. I have another story for you. This is Alice. She is an emergency room nurse. And on a slow Friday afternoon, she is about to leave office. And when she wants to leave her station, the clerk looks up from the desk and asks, by the way, since you're passing housekeeping on your way out, would you remind them that room 12 still needs to be cleaned? And she says, no problem. And on a slow Friday afternoon, this is actually not a problem. That's the only thing she has on her mind. She can do that. And these informal ways, methods, and processes in the hospital have developed over the years. And they keep that hospital humming. The humming work quite well in general, and in optimal times, this is working. This is good. People have it in their heads. It's no trouble to remind housekeeping to come up. It's no trouble to run a special specimen down the lab. And even if these small adjustments are forgotten in time, people will remember and call again. And it's kind of self-regulating. But we don't always live in peaceful times, right? So especially in a hospital, you also have situations like this. And they immediately expose stress under trying circumstances. And when the ward is full and it takes 12 hours for a room to be readied for the next patient, that impact is actually felt not only for one person, but throughout the whole organization. And when the number of small interruptions outweighs the amount of planned work done in any given hour, that impact is felt in slower progress, lower job satisfaction, and potentially lower quality of care. In many situations, it's actually quite clear what needs to be done, but where organizations differ in how they do it, if you look deep into that, it exposes the workflows that the organization is using. If you don't have formalized this, then you completely rely on what the single people have in their head, and if they are experienced people, it tends to work out well, because under stressful situations they start to improvise. However, the moment you have to let go of one of these experienced people and you hire somebody new, that person of course needs to be trained, but this person perhaps even has different experiences. Your whole interlinked situation might crumble down. And it's in trying times when these systems implode. And luckily there are approaches to solve this, and if you have a way to monitor these processes and resources, you can forecast shortages. It's a bit like in software development. The earlier you find a bug, the cheaper it is to fix it. There have been situations in emergency rooms that are quite fatal, that are directly related to such stress situations. There is one really bad thing in hospitals. You get there, you have one problem, they fix it, but then afterwards you die because of an infection. This infection is completely unrelated to the original problem you had. Yeah? And why do they happen, these infections? Every hospital has them. And this is because of a lack in hygiene. And there are solutions, very, very simple solutions to these problems. In 2001, a critical care specialist at the Johns Hopkins Hospital named Peter Pronovost decided to give doctors' checklists a try. And he didn't try to write down everything that a doctor has to do in his day-to-day work. He was only focusing on these central line infections that led to a death rate of 11% of people getting them. And he took just one sheet of paper and he put down some basic rules on how you have to disinfect. And these rules should be no-brainers, right? Every clinical staffer learns them in school. Wash your hands. After you've washed your hands, don't touch anything else anymore. It seems so totally silly to write that down. And he did that anyway, and he asked the nurses to check on the doctors. And in more of a third of the cases, the doctors skipped at least one step. After a while, the hospital authorized the nurses to stop the doctors if they skip a step. And they reported of cases where nurses just gently reminded the doctors, doctor, didn't you just forget to wash your hands? But also cases where the doctors gave them really a body check and say, I want to see that you have enough equipment in your jacket and so on. And when they did that, the infection rate in the first year went down from 11% to 0%. And in the following 15 months, they only had 2 more cases with infections. Afterwards, they calculated that these simple checklists have prevented 43 infections and 8 deaths and saved 2 million in cost. And we are talking about an A4 paper of this size, and this has been adopted by the World Health Organization by now. And it's actually the same thing that pilots also do in planes. Do I actually have pulled up my wheels? Very simple stuff. When you say people should know that, they have been trained. It's not enough. If you are interested more in reading up on what checklists can do, there's a fantastic book I want to recommend, the Checklist Manifesto. It's a great way to not forget trivial things, and we do under stress. It helps newbies a lot. If you get somebody in a new job, he is stressed 360 degrees all the way around for months. And just having a checklist so that he knows, he can trust, this is what I have to do, this is fantastic, gives a lot of peace of mind. Checklists provide guidance and security, so a checklist is a positively connotated thing. And also, if you check a checklist, you have done documentation. You can document that you have done this stuff. So, my talk is a bit about workflows. So, when I talk about workflow, I'm not immediately referring to DC workflow in Plone. A workflow in real life is defined as a set of tasks which is grouped chronologically into processes. And it includes the people and the resources that you need for these tasks, which are necessary to accomplish a certain goal. Quite simple, huh? So what do you actually have to do if you want to digitize such a workflow? So actually you take the tasks, which are in order, grouped by process. That's checklists, right? And you need a way to adapt them quickly. If something changes, you need to make sure that people are using updated checklists. It can be done by templating. And you need a way to track time commitments. If people say, I want to do this task in a certain time, you need to be able to remind them. And you need a way to document and find them and archive them. That's the documentation part. There is a problem in forecasting and doing this stuff. It's only as good as the data that gets collected. So the first step, if you digitize a workflow, is you are pushing people who have done everything out of their brain before into doing more manual work. They have to document this. They have to physically go to a computer and press a checkbox. And this is out of their normal routine, so it's bothering them. So you also need a way to make it positively connotated so that they want to do this extra work because they understand it is saving them time. So the benefit of forecasting using these digitized workflows must exceed the effort for the data collection. So you need to pick very carefully what you want to digitize. You cannot just go and say, okay, first we make an inventory of all the processes in our organization and then we digitize them and the project will take 12 months and then we're done and then our company will run smoothly. That's now not how it works. Your people will kill you for that. So you need to first identify where can we actually achieve a big benefit, do that first and slowly get people on board. And there is a wonderful matrix on XKCD. I have lost my reference which one that is, but I can find that out if you're interested. And who knows that one? Who has seen that before? One, fantastic. I love it, I love it. I have it on my wall, I look at it every day. The top, the X-axis, it shows how often you do a task. And the Y-axis shows how much time could you potentially shove off? How much time can you save on that task? And then in the cells, it calculates over a period of 5 years, how much time can you actually invest in saving time so that it pays off. 5 years is a long time, but in an organization, that's a typical lifetime of a process. So if you digitize a process and put it into your intranet, it will probably live there for at least 5 years. So this is a reasonable calculation. Let's take a look at some extremes. If you look at the top leftmost cell, if you have a task that you do 50 times a day, and you can make it 1 second quicker, it will still pay off to spend 1 day of doing this optimization. And the bottom right, if you do something once a year, it's like preparing your Christmas party, and you can make that 1 day quicker, yeah, it would pay off to save a week to make that time saver. These are not that exciting, actually. Even less exciting is the top right cell. If you do something once a year and you can speed it up for a second, you can spend 5 seconds thinking about it to speed it up. It's not interesting, but these are really interesting. Because that's, for example, something that you do daily. In a hospital, there are a lot of tasks that you do daily. And if you can just make it 5 minutes quicker, yeah, documentation, 5 minutes quicker, it pays to spend 6 days to do this. Or even better, if you have a daily task and you can reduce documentation by 30 minutes, it's worth spending 5 weeks doing this. And this is per person, okay? If you have a hospital with 100 employees who are doing this task, you can spend 100 times 5 weeks and it will pay off. That is an incredible potential in digitizing processes. And now I'm going to show you a few ways how we have done that with Plone Intranet in the past 2 years. One very simple thing is workflow. And you might have seen that before, but it's actually it's an evergreen in Plone Intranet. That is the happy flow where we modeled a DC workflow into a simple metro map. And that way, people suddenly understood workflow. And I'm talking normal people. I'm talking 96% of the population and not 5.4. And if a computer scientist thinks about workflow, he is thinking about a state diagram, transitions and branches, and if this, then that, and it goes this way, and then it joins again. Nobody in that world will understand us if we are starting talking about processes like that. But everybody understands a process like, first you do this, then you do this, then you do this, then you do this, and then you're done. Because that's how it works. And if you do this and it was not good enough, then you take a step back. And then you do it again. And then you go forward if it's good enough. And that's this happy flow that we've modeled there. And this one is quite powerful because it combines two different things. Forcing people to comply to certain rules and allowing people to be flexible in a certain way. And if you look at the top bubble, that's the phase, that's a state in DC workflow. As you might know, a state in DC workflow is coupled with a certain set of permissions. The small vertical lines, that are the transitions in our DC workflow. And the little bubbles within the lines, that are tasks. So if I have certain legal requirements that I have to adhere to, then I model them in states and transitions in DC workflow, and I can force my people to comply, and I can force permissions to change. So in the first state, only one guy has access. If he transitions to the next phase, other people get access and he loses access. I can really have tight control over this. But within a phase, I allow people to create tasks themselves, and by that self-organize how they want to fulfill the task. We use that, for example, for onboarding. Onboarding, in this case, means we have a new colleague who has to complete certain steps and preparations to be able to do the work. Usually you have manifested that in some way. He has to read the company handbook, he has to get a new computer, he has to get an account, he has to sign up for email, he has to report to human resources, whatever. That's a special case of workflow. And it's a workspace with that happy flow, and it contains all the material that this person has to read, to check, to print, to whatever. It contains tasks and events that the new colleague should complete or attend to. And the whole onboarding workspace is a template. So if the company decides we need to add more information or change something, they change the template, and the next person being onboarded automatically has a new material. And here in the case manager, we can easily track. Here we have onboarding of Anja Falterer, and she is 53% through the process. And the happy flow at the same time is a kind of a progress bar. So you can see, how far has she gotten? She's already there. So she should have a computer already. Of course, there are also situations where you have need for such a happy flow with all these constraints. It's something you just want to plan ahead as you go, and that's what we call projects. Projects model unstructured processes. An unstructured process is something where you don't know in advance what will happen to that. You get a letter, somebody wants something, you don't have a process for that. You still see, this is going to take months to answer or to do. It's like when the minister sends a request. Yeah? You will need to put that through different departments. A lot of work needs to be done. It's basically a workflow without security. And you start adding your faces and your transitions and your tasks as you go. At the same time, it's wonderful documentation of what's happening. This looks the same. There's no difference for people, but they can go and add their own faces. There is another wonderful little small application that solves real-world problems. It's just what we call the absence app. It's to get to book holidays. We have this customer, and some people fill out holiday request forms on paper. Some other departments have digitized the process. So they fill out the request on the computer, and then they print it and sign it. And they all post it. They put it into snail mail, even though the administration is across the street, because this is the process that has been established many years ago. That means requesting holidays takes at least 7 days. And if you are not granted your holidays, you will first know 7 days later. And that more or less kills all possibilities for short-term holiday requests. If you say, oh, I'm burned out, I should take the day off tomorrow, forget it, it's not possible. And a nice thing is that if they approve online, it will turn into an event into the central staff calendar, and everybody knows you're not there. It looks like this. You basically fill in a very short form. You also say who is your supervisor, who has to approve this, and who is a replacement. We had huge discussions about how to model the approvement hierarchy in the organization to find out who is able to approve for a certain person. At one point, we decided this is not necessary at all. Because if somebody picks his friend to approve his holidays, and this goes through, he does that exactly one time. As everything is documented, nobody will ever attempt this. People will, in turn, be very precise about who to pick to grant their holidays, because if it is retracted, they don't have holidays. So why would anybody fake this? So people just pick their supervisor. The supervisor comes and approves, and all is fine, it's documented. And then you see your planned absences, and you see the state on the right, light green approved, pending, or rejected in red. And the manager has a similar view, and he can see what he has approved, what is still pending, what he needs to okay. And in the end, the thing just sends an email to the staff department, and they copy it over into their SAP system, and they are also happy because we found out they actually don't need it on paper. Another very nice process is the legal app. Sounds very dry. It keeps your contracts under control. It saves real money because it does a simple thing. It records all the contracts a company has and makes them searchable, and it notifies you on termination dates. So you all probably have a mobile contract, and it auto-renews, and you need to quit it 3 months before the termination period. And nobody actually has a reminder set up, or very little people, I think, that they have to rethink their mobile contract once in a while. And by just recording your contracts there, you can see how many people in my company already have a mobile contract with that company. When do they renew? Can I make a volume contract instead? Can I renegotiate because we are such a good customer? And it basically, again, looks like this. It's a small table with some data. It looks also very dry because finance people usually only want to see letters, it seems. You can upload your contract data, and you have quite a powerful filter. And that way, the legal department in 1 month already saved the double amount of money that it has cost to develop this application. So I think that was the quickest return on investment I've ever seen. And Any idea on which type of contract they save that money? Paper purchase. Copy paper. Collaborative editing. I have attended an open space on editors. We are still looking for a nice online HTML editor, but the real match winner for us is collaborative editing, things that you can do in Confluence or in Google Docs. But due to data protection rules, we usually cannot send our content to an external service provider. But using only Office, it allows them at least to edit Office documents collaboratively. And if you show people that they can open a document together and write the minutes together, they will never do it alone anymore. And this is really powerful, because so far, somebody has written down the meeting notes on paper, and he had to reserve at least 1 hour after the meeting to actually turn the meeting notes into a digital document and upload and distribute it. And now he more or less, the note taker fires up OnlyOffice and starts writing. And if other people see typing mistakes, they just join in and correct them on the fly. And when the meeting is done, the notes are done. And this is so simple and at the same time so powerful. We had completely underestimated that, and when we came with that feature, it was immediately radically adapted. So now I've talked a lot of Plone Intranet. What is Plone Intranet? Quickly, Plone Intranet is already on Plone 5.1.4, and we are sending our developers to the SOAP 4 sprints so that we know how to upgrade. Now that Plone 5.2 Alpha 1 is out, we'll probably start next week trying to port. I love this approach, and we'll definitely support this. We use DC Workflow, Solar Search, Celery, Async, Document Viewer previews. It's not a lot of add-ons, but very powerful ones. We have a few of these smart apps that I showed you for these mini databases that solve a lot of problems. We connect to external apps like the OnlyOffice editing, Zapier, to connect data of other providers. And a big selling point is that simple and easy UI. We have that design-first approach that you might have heard about. We have a dictatorship in design. So everything we do goes through that small design bottleneck, but it leaves us with a tight quality control for easy user interfaces. And that is a main selling point for Plone Intranet, because it abstracts most of all these checkboxes, which most of the time are only implemented for very narrow border cases, but are massively confusing users in their day-to-day work. So what we hear a lot from our customers is that they like Plone Intranet because they don't really notice it. They are able to do a job, and they find out they need some document, and this document is in Plone Intranet, and they just go there, get it, and forget it again. I want to give you a quick example for a Plone Intranet project lifecycle. We had a project, and on day 0, we installed Plone Intranet as a basics for cooperative work. We had a small business team of 5 or 6 people, which we trained, and we set up a little training website where it explains the basics, how to use it. And we did a brown bag session where we just sent to the central mailing list, come if you want, we show the new system. You don't have to use it, it's all fine, it's just if you are interested, take a look. And we had news ready. On the tile section, we configured a lot of tiles to external systems that they are already using. After 1 month, we were through with the business team on how to import static content. So they have a huge website, very old BSCW website, where there are forms and big PDFs and stuff that they went through, filtered out, and we imported that, and suddenly they had proper search. They could see the previews right away. They don't have to download the files and open them to read them, and could easily browse through. And we saw that some people that attended the brown bag session were clicking through the site. After 2 months, we ported the phone book, and we introduced the holiday app. And the big thing was we allowed the cantinas to make food ads in the news section. They got their own section. Suddenly we had a spike in traffic on the intranet, and a lot more early adopters. It's very nice if people come to your website because of food, because they are in a good mood. Yeah? Suddenly they like what they see. Perhaps the food was good. They immediately combine the food with the intranet, which is good. Yeah? And what happens now is people start stumbling over the work of others. They see what they are doing. We have profiles that shows what other people are working on, so you can discover content. And that's what social intranet is about. And they wanted to do the same, so they went to the training website and found out how to do this, or even better, they contacted these people and said, how did you do that? That's all communication that didn't have to go through the business team and didn't have to go through trainings. So we introduced the travel cost reimbursement process, which is one of the most frustrating processes. And people started looking at the intranet to see who's on holidays. The thing is, if you have the holiday process on your intranet, after 3 months, basically 80% of your people have had to go to the intranet to book their holidays. Yeah? And the people started to use the app section as a main navigation entry point because they cannot remember the URLs of all the different services. But as we made them tiles, they just went to the intranet and clicked the tile. 5 months into the project, we introduced administrative workflows, like how to get third-party research money. That's a bit more nerdy, more specific already. And we started to expose the travel cost reimbursement process that were happy flows, as you saw before. And here, that's something for later. And we saw that people were onboarding other people's over lunch. So we saw that in the cantina, people actually told other people how they do it. We saw about 50% of user engagement by that time. And you know what happens in formal communication? Somebody comes, oh, that new intranet is such a shit and I have to learn something new. I don't need that. It works perfectly currently. And that other guy says, why? It's so simple. I could throw away masses of paper. And then that guy who already knows how to use the intranet is implicitly convincing that other ranting guy because he has more information. That is so powerful, and that's something you cannot orchestrate. 9 months into the system, because we exposed the travel reimbursement process to people, so we let them see the happy flows and where their travel reimbursement request is at the moment. We saw that people got a more humble attitude towards the administration. So before, everybody was saying, administration, lazy people. They never work on my stuff. I have to phone them every day. And once they saw all the steps that have to be done to get a travel reimbursement through, and when they got a notification every day that their travel reimbursement has proceeded 1 or 2 steps, they got a humble attitude and so, oh shit, they're doing so much work. I'm embarrassed that I put that upon them with my travel expenses only to get 40 euros reimbursed. Yeah? And the administration people started to lighten up. We also saw that email in started to replace long email discussions. Yeah? send an email, you get an answer, then you involve a third person and a fourth person, and the email gets longer and longer, and you have to read these horrible indented threads to get an understanding. And there's always, you have to scroll down and read that email, then you have to go up and read that email, and go up and read that email. This is not a natural reading flow, and it's really, really stressing if it's not formatted properly. So people started mailing that into workspaces and then using the comment feature there. We saw 98% of user engagement. That's a fantastic number. It basically means, though, people had to book their holidays, so it's not really people actively working with everything, and they had to do their travel expenses there. We saw that users are members in an average of 10 workspaces. And the former document repository had been shut down. We never expected that, because people in the beginning said, it contains everything. 96 gigabytes of data. We cannot shut that down, ever. It's unsupported for 6 years now, no security patches, but we cannot shut that down. And the Central Computation Center has been only offering 1-day training per month to interested people because of the low demand. There was actually not enough demand for more training anymore. And people are saying that they are asking their colleagues how to do stuff. So if you want to do something like this, how can you do that? I would just say get Plone Intranet or Quaive. And if you now ask what is Quaive, then I would tell you there are 2 editions of Plone Intranet, and then I have to explain why. I mentioned this design first approach, and this is a very, very important thing for us, because we have to make sure that it stays easy for people. And if you just install yet another add-on that was done for a completely different use case, you will crash Plone Intranet totally. It lives from its user interface. And if you do work on a project-based work model, you can only work on your software when you have a project. And that is not sustainable for a stack like this. And we definitely want to avoid that it becomes unsupported, and intranets are not software that are replaced after 2 years. So if we install an intranet, we expect that we have to support it for at least 10 years. So we need to make sure that this is a live software. So we have a version that you can actually subscribe to get full support. Still, all is fully GPL. And we decided to just make a delayed release cycle, like closed betas. And every 3 to 6 months, we are pushing the complete stack that we have out to the open again. That is actually coming very soon. We wanted to do that for the conference, but we simply didn't manage. And that is Plone Intranet, the community edition. You can find data on that also on quaive.com. Quaive is basically the name. We had a long discussion that for people not knowing Plone, it's better to brand and to leave technology completely out of the discussion. So version 1.4 is just around the corner. We have new apps, we have tons of small improvements, speed ups, of course, latest Plone 5, and the design first approach. And if you want to go for a customer, we have Quaive Social Intranet. That is what we call the supported edition. We promise full email support. We offer hosted solutions. We offer on-site support. And support with all these different add-ons, LDAP, Active Directory connections, of course, migration support. I think that's stuff that we only offer for the Quaive solution. That's a subscription service, and basically that subscription helps us to maintain the software also if we don't have a software project. We also offer consulting, because it is very talk intensive to introduce an intranet. You have to explain a lot. You cannot just install it and say, use the processes, be happy. You have to look at this and, for example, show them the matrix that I showed you before and say, let's look at the processes that actually give us money
5 more
value. 5 more minutes, super. Then I will tell you how to get in touch and close down. Go to the website, just ask us for a free demo if you want to see it, subscribe to the mailing list, send a note. You can also get a free playground if you don't want to install it yourself, or just send me an email. And if you want to get involved, we have a reseller model. If you don't want to concern yourself with all the technology and just let us do the hosting and the support, but you want to keep your customer, but you are also very welcome to become a consortium member where we are going to onboard you and to explain the whole stack and explain the design first process so that you over time become able to actually sell that on your own. Quaive, that is smart collaboration. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alexander. We have 4 minutes for questions.
So the workflow kind of mini apps, right? You're calling them smart apps. Is that the same thing? The same name?
That's probably the one thing that is a little bit special because it hooks into a DC workflow that you have to put underneath. Yeah.
Okay.
It's an extended workspace. It's basically a normal workspace, and we also show the workflow in that workspace.
Okay, so my question is, like, to develop a new workflow, how quick is it? And can the client do it themselves at all, or they have to basically come to you guys, or how much work is involved?
If the client knows how to configure a DC workflow, he can do it himself, because it is basically nothing else than a content type that bases on a workspace and has a local workflow policy. But we found out that no client is ever able to do this, and instead it takes about 1 week to 1 month to talk through them what their process actually is, and then it takes 2 hours for us to click it together.
Any other question? Okay, then thanks again, Alexander.
There's one.
There's one. Oh, sorry.
How much does the subscription prices cost?
For a small setup with up to 50 users, I think we have €6 per seat a month. And then it's get less the more users you have. But it's important to consider that it includes complete hosting and support, so it's a carefree setup. Seeing details on the homepage.
We have time.
Thank you very much.
Sorry. We have time for another question, if there is one.
Sorry, then the hosting's only in Europe?
We have hosting possibilities in Europe and in the US with 6 feet up.
Okay, time's up. Thanks again, Alexander, for your talk.
Thank you.